Thank you all for being here. I'd like to take this opportunity to explore the impact and future of institutions such as education, law, religion, politics, and other societal structures which have been shaped by a patriarchal mindset. The aim of today's dialogue is to reimagine these institutions in a way that will more effectively drive economic and social empowerment of women and other marginalized communities in the workplace and in our society. I want to kick off this session with an exploration of the efficiency of top-down leadership in driving mindset and behavioral change in the context of gender equality. Minister Chagger, the Canadian government has been quite successful in its top-down efforts to encourage its citizens to view multiculturalism as an integral component of the Canadian identity. How can governments apply the same top-down strategy to driving a shift towards mentalities that support women's economic empowerment?
Thank you. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be here. What we've been doing in Canada with the leadership of our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, is that for the first time we have gender parity at the cabinet table. So when we are when we are putting forward laws, legislation, we are ensuring the entire population is being represented. So we know very well that we live in a male-dominated society, especially when it comes to politics. Many of the laws that have been created without the perspective of women. So we need to ensure that there's nothing about us without us. So we have the opportunity to be engaged. And something the Prime Minister has been doing and Canadians have been doing is encouraging more women to run for office. So a person like me never would have imagined running for office, would never have imagined winning an election, let alone being at the cabinet table. But I have a Prime Minister that has confidence in me, asked me to become the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, and most recently asked me to take on additional responsibilities as the Government House Leader. So Canada celebrated 150 years last year, and for the first time there was a woman in the role of Government House Leader. So that shows you that it can be done, and by all of us working together, we will get there. And the last thing I would say is that we've advanced legislation in regards to boards, so that businesses, federally regulated businesses, are looking at the number of women and the diversity on boards. In India, you have similar legislation where you have to have one woman on every board. To achieve true equality, we will need a period of equity. So we really need to encourage more girls, more young people, more diversity. In Canada, just like in India, diversity is our strength, but not just the shells we occupy. The diversity of languages, of cultures, of perspectives of where we come from, and that's how I think we'll ultimately be able to live in a world that's more representative of the people in the country and world. Thank you.
Thank you. Ishita, your strategy to create gender equality has been more oriented towards youth-led grassroots social movements. What roles can government, education, or other social structures play to facilitate efficient bottom-up grassroots movements?
I mean, so to begin with, I was 15, the first time I actually started working with young people in the country, and there's a very powerful quote by Audre Lorde that says, "There is no such thing as a single-issue struggle because we do not lead single-issue lives." So if we're going to talk about reimagining systems, we're talking about three things. We're talking about challenging patriarchy. We're talking about breaking the myth that economic growth and development issues are silos that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. You know, I mean, working on economic growth in this country is considered to be a masculine issue. It's driven by hard data. It talks about FDI and growth. Development is always something that comes to the softer side. And I think a lot of that thinking in itself needs to be challenged. The last, I think, is around recognizing intersectionality and the value of how issues at the end of the day are connected. For example, if you look at movements that are historically powerful, a lot of the reasons why is because they challenge power and they bring some of the systemic inequalities to the table. What you need at that point is a really powerful conversation where governments have the courage to be able to actually stand up for the rights of people in civil society to speak out. That's something that's under threat in many countries in the world today, including in spaces like the United Nations. On the other hand, we also have governments like Canada, say, for example, that are advancing that thinking around how you actually empower communities that have been systematically oppressed. They have that in their feminist assistance policy that I actually had the luxury of working on and was quite incredible. At the same time, I think at the end of the day, it is very much also about the importance of looking at how education is funded and how governments work using their education systems to address stigma in communities. And I'll give you a very quick example. In 2010, 13 state governments banned sexuality education in India. This is in a country, by the way, where data shows us that the first time that young people have sex, it is largely unprotected, and that for many girls, it is usually without their consent. Today, in 2018, that ban is down to 5 states. We have really progressive policies that the Indian government has put into place, like the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, that actually talks about reaching health and well-being to 243 million adolescents in the country. So when you're going to talk about changing social mindsets with 1.3 billion young people, you need to understand, with 1.3 billion people, of which 30% of the country is under 25 years of age, you need to look at system change as something that's complex and something that requires partnerships. And so the relationship between governments and movements is actually much more systemically important and much more systemically rooted in our democratic traditions than we sort of, I think, look at. I mean, I think I'll wrap up by saying this. This basic idea that, for example, some lives should matter less, that governments and youth organizations or youth movements have very little to do with each other, that you can really achieve meaningful economic growth without ensuring people's human rights. A lot of this is a myth. From my experience, leadership actually lies in how you create inclusive partnerships in communities, and government is key in leading that process. At the end of the day, our governments have been elected from these communities, and they belong to that fabric. So how we really include each other, I think, is very fundamental to the kind of society we look to create.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is addressed to Lakshmi ji. A gender-inclusive society is one in which no gender identity is prioritized on the basis of sex, sexuality, race, or any other factor. Yet, mainstream feminist movements often ignore the voices of certain communities. For example, the mainstream media has only recently begun spotlighting trans women's voices. Could you discuss how to modify our institutions, educational, societal, and governmental, to ensure that marginalized voices come to light sooner?
Good morning, and Jai Shri Mahakal. See, the biggest thing, whichever society, and when you make policies, the biggest change where is required is the education system. And as India being colonized, our education system is still very colonized, and we haven't come out of it. The morality which was injected by the Britishers still has such a strong patriarchal presence. And when certain politicians and leaders want to claim that when they want to divide the country and when they want to address gender with religion, with culture, which is bullshit. Us as Indian, our culture was way ahead. We were more accepting. We had space for every gender in the society. So we should go back to our own roots. We should first thing, and what you said is right. See, I was recently talking to Payal Aunty when I was walking in, and I said this whole movement of good girls and bad girls has to end up. Then only there will be success. Otherwise, they say good girls go to heaven and bad girls go everywhere. I rather be the bad girl and go everywhere. Who wants to go to heaven? Create a heaven for everybody over here. One biggest thing which every constitution should follow is a non-discriminative policy. Until you don't have a non-discriminative policy, Lakshmi can be gay, lesbian, woman, whatever, he, she, it, or whatever. But if I'm productive for the society, use my productive value. Don't, my gender, don't, my gender Because I believe that my gender and my sexuality and my choices is in my bedroom. It's not on the streets. And what I do in my bedroom is nobody's problem, you know. Why to bother what goes of our father, you know, it is that way. And I believe at present in India, which we are staying, I still remember when we started 1999, we started the first organization of transgender. And from there till 2018, we are the global leaders in transgender rights. We have 2 bills in the Lok Sabha. We have such a strong voices and a beautiful bill prepared by our present government and Minister of Social Justice and Empowerment, Thawarchand Gehlot. I thought he is 70 plus, and I thought there could be such a big generation gap which we talk about. But when we talk to our agencies, we should see that it is not about Lakshmi. It is about the generation which is coming. You know, every leader, every activist should have that sense. Our life, today I will be becoming 40, and rest another 50 years if I live, you know, still young and beautiful. But how we make those things, what I have gone in my life, shouldn't come to my community. Because I still remember was so difficult for me in college to even go and use the restroom. And now in India, where the West or US is still fighting transgenders should use which bathroom, and there is Supreme Court case going, over here in our country it was like one circular by the Ministry of Water and Sanitization that the transgender person has the right to choose his or her own bathroom. I said, hallelujah. Good, we don't again have to go, you know, to... So, institutions. See, biggest problem with our country is education system. And the biggest problem is, as Indian, we don't know our own policies. We don't know our own policies, and we don't know our own rights as an Indian. And if you don't know your own rights, how you will go and access it? So the simplify whatever policies, whichever government makes, should see to it that it trickles down to those marginalized community which is actually needed. And those policies shouldn't be made without those members of the community which is marginalized, because I know my own sorrows. I can feel the pain of the biological woman, but how would a biological woman feel a pain of a discovered woman like me? You know, so it's very woman. But at the end of the day, patriarchy has always crushed femininity, whether it is biological or whether it is discovered. And I say atrocities on Lakshmi or people like Lakshmi, it's not on Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, it was on the femininity what I possessed and I am proud of. So the one thing, you know, I would really want to address, gender is the session. We as a society have forgot to teach our women to love themselves. And we should again tell our mothers, our sisters, our friends to love themselves. Like in the morning I get up and before even putting the red lipstick, I say, Lakshmi, you're hot, you're sexy, and I love you. I really tell myself 200 times, even men, even you can use this formula, you know, free of cost, of all the atrocities which you all have given to the womankind. But no, all men are not bad, you know. Yeah, but one thing is there. It's necessary that there should be a political commitment, like the Prime Minister of Canada had, the political commitment to give gender an equal platform. But I wish there was a transgender also in your cabinet, you know. Yeah, for the next time, you know, it would be, you know, something. India, yeah. So so it could be balanced, you know, all the 3 genders in one cabinet, yo. So it would be, yeah. So, and biggest thing is that we as a society, we should consider ourselves as human. whether whichever religion we follow, it is only humanity, and if we consider ourselves as humans, that will solve our problem. And we should teach the coming generation that respecting every gender, it may be he, she, it, or whatever you all feel. The biggest thing, we all are humans, and no human being can be treated as transparent object. One more point, 1 minute I'll take of you. The biggest sorrow in this world is the sorrow of being felt unloved, which my sisters across the world have felt. And the biggest strength, what my community sister has, the strength not to surrender. So we have lived with pride and dignity, and we would request that the generations to come to treat everybody with dignity.
Thank you. Thank you. Lakshmiji mentioned policies and the legal structure, so the next one's for you, Karuna. While a variety of legal frameworks have been created to protect against gender-based discrimination, both in India and around the world, the enforcement of these laws is weak. How do you go about enforcing laws that prohibit behavior that frequently happens behind closed doors and which can be difficult for victims to report?
You know, it's wonderful to be in a crowd that's so young. And the reason is because I see so many change makers before me. I see the Leh ice hockey team. Big hand for them. I see school children who have very different expectations from us when we were growing up and from our mothers. I see innovators, I see Network Capital, I see my own legal team, and I see young people who are working hard and trying to imagine an equal world in their different ways. And the reason that this is absolutely essential is because so far our gains in terms of gender equality, and not women's equality, because as Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi said so eloquently, gender is a construct. And these sorts of boxes that we all get slotted into, almost from birth, you know, whether it's blue or pink or whether it's our sexualities, it's just untrue. So in terms of the spectrum of sexuality, in terms of the spectrum of gender, this is something that is starting to be recognized. But change has been desperately incremental. The reason the Me Too movement happened primarily in North America, but also here to some extent, is because legal systems so far do not deliver proper due process. They do not deliver justice. Quite apart from that, we look at our conviction rate, for instance. It's higher than a lot of countries in the world. It's higher than a lot of developed countries in the world in India, at about 25%. But it has gone down. Recently, we saw, you know, the sex ratio last week. The sex ratio has dropped. There are fewer girl babies now born. More girl fetuses are being aborted as we develop as a country, as we grow richer in the richer states. Women working in the, women's labor participation rate is reducing. It's reduced from the 1990s, 35%, it's reduced to 28%. So, is it all doom and gloom? How do we fix this? We have a bunch of laws, right? But make no mistake that laws cannot happen in isolation. The tidal wave that we need, one of the waves we saw in 2012, where men, women, teenagers came out onto the streets in Delhi and said that sexual assault is not just your problem. This is all our problem. And on the back, and many of you came out too. And on the back of that is when the 2013 anti-rape laws came. And I was one of the people who worked on that. And we got a number of things. There were some hacks, for instance, some disruptors, since we're talking about innovation. For example, and I'm going to just put out the section here, 166A, right? If you are assaulted, if you are attacked in some way, and if you go to a police officer and you say, and they're not registering your complaint, which is a big problem in India, you cite the section of the Indian Penal Code, and very often they will just do it. Why? Because if they don't, this section makes them criminally liable for not registering the complaint, the constable or the SHO or the, whoever's in charge there. When we talk about sexual assault, we sometimes forget that 94% of the rapes in this country happen in the context of marriage and are not criminal at all, right? I mean, they are criminalized under cruelty, which is much lesser punishment. You don't get the kind of protection that you would get if you were a rape victim and you didn't know your rapist. Also, stalking is a bailable offense, which means that if somebody has been following me and threatening me for months, years even, they can't be arrested and put in jail as of right. A magistrate can't do anything about it because it is bailable. They have a right to just walk out and leave and keep, start doing it again until the trial ends. So these are things that we are now trying to fix. I am arguing before the Delhi High Court the fact that marital rape is the legality of marital rape is unconstitutional. And we have a lot to depend on. We have judgments of the Supreme Court, 9 judge benches that speak of sexual autonomy, reproductive freedom, bodily integrity. They speak of women's constitutional rights as being 100% equal to the rights of anyone else. In order to make this a reality, a constitution is only as good as the everyday experience of the citizens that it governs. And in order to make this a reality, there's one very important thing that needs to be done, which is that the people who it's supposed to serve, these laws are supposed to serve, it's got to be a dialectical effect. What do I mean by that? That we've got to claim these rights constantly. We've got to use disruptions where necessary, whether they are, in this Me Too way, which does have problems, but the reason that people accessed it is because there was no other option, and then, there's a certain wave of justice that comes off the back of that. And also, just in very hard-nosed policy-making terms, we've got to make sure that it's not just upper caste, Hindu, straight men, able-bodied men, making decisions in parliament, in the courts, in government, and in our everyday lives. We need more of us at the tables, because it's not just about symbolism. It's about bringing all of our experiences to govern all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. The last one is for you, Haley. Sorry. Similar to how marginalized voices are excluded from mainstream media, female voices continue to be absent from traditionally male-dominated areas, sports, finance, technology. How do you think there are ways, what are various ways that we can effectually empower young women to feel more confident to enter male-dominated areas?
So thank you for the question. So I grew up, obviously, in Canada. I'm Canadian, and ice hockey in Canada is our #1 sport. So it is what people live and breathe. It is what makes us Canadian. And when I was a little girl, I wanted to play ice hockey. Unfortunately, my mom and dad said, girls can do anything boys can do, and they allowed me to play hockey. But at the time I started playing, people would say, girls don't play hockey, you should ballet, you should do figure skating, anything but ice hockey. And so when I started playing hockey, there were 10,000 girls and women in Canada playing hockey. Today, there are 100,000 girls and women playing hockey in Canada. And I believe the reason why is because of very brave women, like the women I played with on the national team, and people that believed in them. So one of the things that I want to do now in my life after sport is believe in others. And today we have some very special girls with us. They are the Indian National Ice Hockey Women's Team. Stand up, stand up, stand up. I don't know if many of you know that women play ice hockey in India, but they do. And they are very good, they are getting better, and they are the women, just like all of you kids up there, who are going to change the world. Because, absolutely. Because it's one thing to be the best in the world at something. I played hockey for Canada. We were the best in the world for many, many years. It's completely another thing to be the best for the world. And so I think through sport and by empowering women in sport, letting girls play, letting them be engaged, you're now becoming the best for the world. And so you girls here today are going to change many people's lives. And all of you kids that are here today, I want you to know, especially you young girls, that there are opportunities for you more than what I had in my life when I started playing. You have to be brave, you have to be willing to take action, and you have to learn not to listen to the critical opinion of others, and you need champions. And so, so I just want to say, as a Canadian and as a Canadian athlete, I have lived and traveled around the world for many years. Canada believes in you. We believe in the opportunities that you should be provided. I'm very grateful to be here to be able to meet these young, beautiful Indian women that we are bringing to Canada next year to play hockey in Canada. And I hope for all of you to have opportunities like this. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone, Minister Shagar, Karuna, Ishita, Haley, and Lakshmiji for an insightful conversation. I'm hoping that all the young change makers can take some of these thoughts and have these ideas resonate. Hopefully this leads to impact in the future. Thank you so much.